So thank you for joining us. We're here with Ty from Maxis, and we're going to talk today about some of the things that are pressing in terms of finding out about the attention and the attention-starved consumer today, and how we can actually, as marketers, actually get the attention of the consumer. So, Ty, what are some of your challenges that you face when trying to get the attention of your consumers?
Thanks for having me, first and foremost. And I think it's a really good question to start as we talk about the people that we address most of the time. And we could see it either two ways, right? We could see it either as we're a business trying to reach out to customers, or we're a brand that's trying to engage real people in that sense. And I think increasingly there is a imperative to do the latter so you could achieve the objective of the former. And I think that's a slight shift in mindset and may seem nuanced, but it's very critical to what we do in the company today. And I think that's in recognition of a couple of things that's happening. One, obviously, is the sort of slightly over talked about topic of digitalization. And obviously in the area of, in the industry that I'm in telco, obviously that's very important and we relate to that very much. But more than that if you look at the effect of digitalization and what it's done, it's essentially allowed us to discover, or at least start to realize, that the antiquated means of segmenting customers or pigeonholing them into sort of these stereotypical profiles are no longer relevant in a way. So I think one of the biggest, to your earlier question, I think one of the biggest challenges that we see that's affecting us most is this sort of hyper-segmentation of people and of individuals, in theory at least.
What are some of the tools and the technologies that you have at your disposal right now that seems to be working for you to actually be able to get the attention?
There's obviously a lot of efficiency tools related to advertising technology and marketing technology. So that ranges from sort of more front-end tools where we used to buy digital advertising, sort of DSPs and programmatic, as everybody talks about, or investments that we've made internally to understand customers better related to CEMs and sort of life cycle or customer management perspectives. So we realized it's probably not so recently, but I think a lot of companies will very soon realize, if not realized already, that they're sitting in a gold mine of data. And data is not limited to sort of digital interaction. Every single engagement that your frontline or your channels have with customers at stores is a point of data or a potential source of information. Everything you do from a call center perspective, everything you do from an account management or relationship manager perspective, those are all sources of information. And above and beyond that, of course, from a sort of network, from our industry specifically, from a network perspective, you have a sort of treasure trove of information. The biggest challenge is to understand necessarily how to piece those things together in some sort of meaningful way, which kind of brings us back to the tools you mentioned. Without those tools that we have, or that we're starting to invest in heavily, you're not going to be able to see people for the profiles and the behaviors that they are individually, rather than, again, the stereotypical segment, relying on sort of secondary data. This is no longer so applicable or relevant today.
So if I were to take away all your tools and just leave you with one, which one would it be?
So this may be a cop-out answer, but the truth is, if you're left out without the tools, you'd probably fall back on your most important asset, which is people. Your people are, maybe slightly understating when we call them tools, but I think our biggest source of pride or our biggest source of empowerment are our people.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we're very, very proud of, obviously, in Maxis. And it's a very good mixed bunch. And I think there is a lot of value in the diversity of people that we have. It's not only a diversity of skill sets and specialists in what they do, but also largely the willingness and the attitudes, the willingness to sort of move around and learn new things, explore new things, the area of curiosity, and sort of that sort of natural predisposition to constantly be curious and want to figure out better ways of doing what seems to be fairly normal things. So our people are our most powerful tools, and the way they come together is very important.
Any stories? Anything that will inspire the audience?
Let me share a couple of stories that I've discovered fairly recently. One is sort of the power of simplicity. We've had for a long time, as with most companies, spent a lot of effort in terms of tactical endeavors. We'd go out and put out resources, run campaigns, put budgets behind them to sort of drive sort of more immediate or short-term goals. And that happens all the time. And most recently, for example, we've discovered the power of a dollar. And what we meant by that was simplistically, and again, this may not be the most mind-blowing of revelations, but we found it surprising that as much as we'd offer customers lower and lower entry prices to certain propositions or value props, we've kind of bottomed out to a point where we said, this item is literally free. And here's a free item, and all you have to do is maybe be our customer. So that was surprisingly, or maybe not so surprising for some, not performing as much as we'd like. And we were kind of surprised and perplexed. I mean, how could something that was free not be incredibly valuable to what seems to be a market that was constantly value-seeking and looking for a bargain? And we made slight, simple changes to the way we communicate these. And we literally priced them at $1. So it's weird. We actually increased prices from a free denomination to a small sort of not so heavy sum of $1. And that has done superbly well for us from a tactical perspective. And it's very interesting to see that. And if I'm entirely honest, it wasn't scientifically derived. Neither was it super data derived. But we had, so there was probably two things that made it work. One was just general curiosity of how people behaved. And again, some of the people that work with us sort of had that suggestion. Secondly, of course, is the willingness to try something. But then the third point is probably important. There's good to have an appetite for risk and for trying something new. But it's equally important to be measuring in real time, or at least in near time, of how these experiments or trials are working. So as soon as we discovered it was working, very soon, not after our efforts started, we quickly doubled down because we knew it was working very well. So I think it's simplicity. There is a lot of value in simplicity. There's a lot of value in curiosity and risk-taking. But very critically, and the boring part about it is, it's really important to kind of track what you're doing at all times. So I think that it's a recent story. So this Power One campaign we've kind of run for a good significant amount of time this year as the year closes. And it's done fantastically well for us. And people look forward to what's the next $1 deal that sort of Maxis presents.
Tell me another story.
I'll tell you another story which is probably less specific about campaigns and more about trying to relate to necessarily marketeers today. So this, while I'm not new to this industry, this role has been a slight shift for me recently. And it's necessitated a sort of step back and relook at how we're set up as an organization. One of the areas that's a key buzzword to everybody is the area of digital. And the most learning I've had, or the period of biggest learnings that I've made, which is still ongoing, I admit, is from the area of digitalization. So people talk about digital marketing as if it's this magic pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And while verdict's still out whether that's true, it is perfectly okay, as I think, in my opinion, to admit that we don't know much about it. Not to say we don't have all the jargons thrown at us, not to say we don't have all the biggest boys in the market speak to us. We have great people that work with us. We see all the benchmarks coming from other markets in the world. But yet, I think it's okay to have that fear, and it keeps you honest in a lot of ways. To sort of respect it and understand that while it's potentially powerful, there are lots of things we don't know about it. And every topic from that is plaguing the industry now, from sort of fraud, from measurements, accountability, to how we plan for it and how we strategize it and ultimately implement it, how we optimize it, how we attribute one outcome to the other. There is so many unknowns. And that is at the same time prohibitive to a person kind of delving onto the topic. But I find it incredibly interesting at the same time. And I think it comes from the fact that I hadn't started it thinking that I knew a lot about it. I'm starting this from a perspective of I'm afraid of it and I have no idea what we're doing. But it's led me to so many questions, so many discussions, a lot of challenges to status quo, a lot of rethinking not only the tools we use, but also the process by which we use them, and the people that ultimately are managing them or operating them on a daily basis. So again, this is maybe not a specific story of a campaign per se, but I think we should embrace digital, but we should also embrace the sort of fear that comes with it, the unknown that comes with it. And it's a really exciting space. I do believe it's immensely powerful. I also believe there may be its limitations, but who knows at this point. But it's important to just jump into it, keep an open mind, and sort of start learning from it.
You think it also could be that people are so almost immune to the word free now because they always realize there's a catch behind it. And with $1, they know what they're paying for. They know they're going to get something because they're paying money for it.
It's probably, and this is again retrospectively looking at it. And if we were to look at it and see why would this happen, you're probably entirely right. There is a desensitization and even a apprehension towards something that is given to you for free. And the root cause of these would lie in sort of psychology more than it is really about value perception or pricing. And so often I think, especially people in sort of branding and communications and marketing, get so caught up in product propositions and pricing that they kind of forget what their roles are. So my role has never been to necessarily figure out what products would do, what pricings would do. I'll use that in context in development of strategies, but you always kind of have to remind yourself that your goal is to add value above and beyond what seems to be sort of pricing, product benefits, sort of core pricing benefits. You have to get beyond that and put yourself out and see what you need, how you can add value from a sort of marketing and branding perspective. So your point earlier about getting attention in today's world and being able to identify with people, not specific, not broad segments, is probably very important. And it's rooted in psychology and behavioral science, as you sort of inferred to. I think that's really important.
That's probably the most valuable way to look at it in terms of keeping your mind open and just going for it and keep testing and reiterating and trying out, because nobody knows the true answer.
Exactly, your point about reiteration is essentially a better word for experimentation if you think about it. There needs to be a willingness to trial, or at least the risk, or at least embrace the risk that comes with it. But like the point I made earlier about the campaign that we had learned from was that it's really important to, while you try, you need to know what you're measuring or what you're trying to track. If you don't understand what success looks like, or potentially could look like, and you don't keep an eye on it, then proof of concepts will forever be proof of concepts and would never sort of materialize into anything that's scalable or something that you can practice for the long run.
So what's next for 2018? What are your plans and resolutions for the coming year?
We're on the cusp of something interesting, both as an industry and as a company. Like the points about the industry earlier that I've mentioned, people are increasingly digital. The way they interact with what they ultimately buy and what they ultimately discover along the way are changing. And that's not new. That's something you and I personally will relate to. And I think gone are the days that we will say that, that's the limited few, the people who are so-called savvy. Those are the guys changing. But that's simply not true. Our mothers, I'm sure to some extent, are using technology in ways that we never imagined a couple of years ago. So as that behavior shifts, and there's this macro trend where sort of the economic outlook in the near future may not be, maybe slightly sort of less in growth mode than ever and before, we're sort of in unprecedented times. We're simultaneously facing a situation where the world is changing, we are changing, and people are changing at the same time. So it's in this flux that I think there are lots of opportunities. So for Maxis itself, a couple of big things that we think, like I say, we're on the brink of. One is we we will continuously try to unlock the insight of the singular individuals. And maybe that's a pipe dream, and maybe that will never be economically viable as a business to necessarily only market to one. But I think it's really important to say that we would like to figure out how we could relate to clusters of individuals better. So a combination of our tools, people, and processes to gain better insight into individuals is starting to come to fruition. And we'll see a lot of that this coming year. So then the big challenge will be how to translate that to business. So while we have that insight of people on a sort of singular or smaller granular level, how do we effectively use technology to be able to reach these guys in a meaningful way? So that's the biggest challenge I think we face, to be able to relate to individuals in Malaysia.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ty. Thank you for your time, and wish you all the best for 2018.